a subscriber messaged me and was like, "Hey, can you come fix my church sound?" I'm like, all right, well, that like it's sound is sound, so it doesn't matter what genre of music and like where it's located. Let me just fix the room. It's chances are people don't know what they're doing. And I'm a big fan of Gordon Ramsay, and I'm obsessed with Kitchen Nightmares. So I'm like, all right, let me make a fun bit out of this. Let me make a parody. So the first Mixdown Meltdown episode is literally I took the credits from Kitchen Nightmares and I just like crossed out the R and I put Hamzy's Kitchen Nightmares. Hamzy's Sound Guy Nightmares. That's what I called it. The most consistent issue that I ran into are drummers who don't know how to tune their kit. And their kits aren't bad. It's not like they're having to Fisher Price my first drum set and they're expecting like, John Bonham sounding drums.
Right.
They're good kits. They're like Yamaha studio kits and like they're pretty competent drum sets. Get a couple of fresh Evans heads on there and you're golden. If people don't have good cable management, it translates to me that you don't really care as much as you say you do.
Chris Hamill, welcome to the Churchfront Worship and Tech podcast.
Thanks a lot, guys, for having me on. This is pretty surreal to be a part of this.
Yeah, Chris, we've been loving, our team has been loving your content on YouTube, and I'm excited for our audience to get to know you a little bit better. So before we jump in, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners, tell us who you are, what you do, what you're up to these days.
Well, first off, it's really surreal that you guys at Churchfront are watching my content in general. Like, it's pretty crazy. Like, I've been doing YouTube stuff for just a little over a year and a half now, and you guys comment on my videos, you guys watch my stuff, and it's just amazing when like the big dogs of the whole church like sound scene are watching my content. So that's pretty amazing. But as far as like what I do during the day, I'm actually a photographer during the day. So I mostly photograph real estate and headshots, weddings, and all that fun jazz. But this is an audio-based podcast. So I work at a music venue. We are mostly a hard rock, punk, and metal venue. I don't think churchgoers would be kind to the music that we normally feature, but the bands that we feature are not as down with the Lord as you guys might like. But I work at a music venue in northern New Jersey, just outside of New York, and I've been there for about 4 years. Been doing live sound for better part of 15 years, and combined that with studio work in my home studio and various project studios over the years. So roughly around 20 years of audio experience.
I love it. Tell us the backstory of how you got into audio, because you obviously have a passion for the field. Like, what was your upbringing like getting into it professionally?
Honestly, getting into audio was a happy accident. Like growing up as the quiet, shy, nerdy, fat kid that was watching anime and cartoons and playing video games all day, you can imagine how easy it was to pick on me. So I found salvation while listening to Howard Stern in the morning and listening to the likes of Opie and Anthony and various other what they call shock jocks back in the day. On my way to and from school, and I found my sense of humor through them, and I wanted to be in radio. And I originally wanted to be on the air. I wanted to be the next Howard Stern. And after high school, I got involved with my college radio station, and it was all downhill from there. I stopped going to classes. I eventually dropped out of school altogether because I found what I wanted to do. And as I was hosting my really terrible rock show, I sucked as a DJ, but I didn't stop doing it because I loved it. And I had a band come in. It was my buddy's band, and they were like, hey, can you record our next demo? And to quote the great Jeremy Clarkson, I was like, well, how hard can that be? And I used whatever rinky-dink mixer I could find at their house, any microphones that we have. We had the cheap Chinese knockoffs of the Chinese knockoff 58. So like microphones that cost like $10, but we managed to get a multi-track demo and I fell in love with it. Like I it sounded like garbage, but it didn't stop me from going like, oh, this is so cool. Like the drums sound so different in the room versus when I mic it up. So why is that? How come it does that? And I just like went into an entire like downward spiral of many late nights on YouTube watching tutorials and just learning about how audio works. And I eventually got halfway decent 2 years into it. And God bless my buddy's band for letting me record them for free all those years of just building up my skill set. And then eventually they asked me to do live sound for them at a bar. And they provide the PA, the mixer, and everything. And all I did was mic everything up. And that was my first experience doing live sound. And it was just great. And really, audio was a happy accident. I going to school, I grew up wanting to be a chef, and I had an entire restaurant planned out. A couple of my buddies were going to invest all of our money into building a restaurant, and I got suckered into audio. And I was like, why the hell would I want to stay like on my feet for 14 hours a day in a kitchen making slave wages? Like, forget that. So I'll instead waste my days making slave wages, recording bands that don't know how to play in time. So there was that story into audio. Eventually, though, I started podcasting, doing a couple of my Howard Stern knockoff podcasts, and producing my buddy's podcast. I collaborated with my other friends' podcasts who are now blowing up on the internet. We formed an entire podcast network, and I just got involved with producing, narrating, doing promos, doing voiceover, learning how to project my voice like a vocalist and a singer. And my dad sings a cappella. He sings bass in a group. So for those of you who don't know, he's the guy that goes like ba 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 in the a cappella group. So he does that, and he kind of forced vocal lessons on me, as well as my introduction to church and Sunday school as a kid. So see, I'm trying to tie in the church thing all together here. So
there you go.
Just doing that and going to my second stint of college, I got my associates in music tech. I basically self-taught myself everything that needed to be learned in order to pass the courses. So it was a very easy, degree to get. But I used it to get a internship with SiriusXM, and I worked at SiriusXM for about 5 years.
Wow.
And when the job ended, I was completely burnt out. Like, it was, I never took a sick day. I never took a vacation day. It was 5 years straight of just grinding, because it's a dog eat dog world in the world of broadcasting entertainment. You guys know this.
What field were you in at Sirius? What were you actually doing? What was the role there?
I was a producer. So okay. I was booking guests. I was narrating, like I was making promos. I was clipping segments. I was trimming audio. I was literally working with the host day to day out. And the show I was working on was a show called Busted Open, and it's a professional wrestling themed show, and they still have a YouTube channel that I basically built for them. So when the company let me go in summer of 2019, I went to the beach every day to just start taking pictures of whatever I could take pictures of. And there was one day that I found a couple dudes just going into the ocean on their kayaks, and the sun was coming up, and it just looked amazing. It looked like one of those like oil paintings. And next thing you know, I post on my Instagram, and Seaside Heights, Point Pleasant, and all the Jersey Shore towns started messaging me like, hey, can we use this image? We'll give you credit. We'll buy the license. I'm like, okay. And then a couple of friends of mine were like, dude, like, this is actually pretty good. Like, we're usually one to like crap on you and tell you everything you do sucks, but this is actually a legitimately good photo. So I'm like, okay, I'll take pictures. 2020 comes around, and I get a job photographing for a car dealership. It's work, but I was taking pictures, and all the time I was still recording bands and, recording in my home studio, like perfecting my craft of bare minimalism in the studio. And then COVID hit, and it was one of those weird situations where like state unemployment, federal like grants or anything, like nothing, what I was accepted for nothing, because I made too much money to get government subsidies, and I wasn't making enough to pay all my bills. So I was like rock and hard place situation. And my landlord just happened to know a real estate agent. And that's how I got involved with real estate photography. I've been doing that ever since. And I haven't had a regular job since. I've been working on my own. And luckily, my buddy's band, who's like, well, I'll come full circle now. The band that I started out doing audio with back like 10, 15 years ago at this point, their singer is a is a doorman and security at the venue I work at, which is called Dingbats in Clifton, New Jersey. He worked doors and they need a new sound guy. So he gave my name to the manager. Her name's Michelle. And I've been there for about 4 years now. So
Wow.
that's been my regular, like, full circle moment. Like, you don't know where stuff's going to go. And long story short, my entire life essentially is how did this happen? And
Yeah.
like, how did this guy get in this situation? I sometimes am still dumbfounded with how I got to where I am today.
I want to, keep moving with the story, because now you have even ventured into not just real estate photography, not just running front of house at shows, but you've actually become a content creator on YouTube. That's how we stumbled across you. And one of the first videos I think we came across was you fixing a mix at a kind of like a gospel style Northeastern church, primarily black gospel music. And it's like with an X32 compact, maybe, if I'm remembering correctly. Okay. And it's just these POV shots. I don't know if you're using like a GoPro or something, but what got you into the YouTube space, specifically with fixing audio or adjusting audio situations?
Again, this is the story of my life is a happy accident. If I have an autobiography, it will be a happy accident, the Chris Hamill story. So I promise I'll make the story a little shorter. So when I was doing front of house at Dingbats, I was like, okay, I got to make a little extra money, because in the world of photography and real estate, being a freelancer, anyone who works freelancer knows this, especially with the last couple of years with how bad inflation's gotten, it's tough to grind and make a living out there as a freelancer. So I have to think of new creative ways to generate income for myself. And since I was let go from SiriusXM because of the YouTube channel that I made for Busted Open, and how I learned how the algorithm reach, how titling changes everything, how images on the thumbnails, presentation of the content, I learned how to basically make a channel grow. And I'm like, you know what? If I could do it for Busted Open, I can do it for myself. And granted, everyone knows WWE Pro Wrestling. Everyone knows Busted Open. No one knows who I am. So I'm like, if I can make this face marketable on YouTube, I will, I'll bet on myself. Like, who cares? Like, what's the worst that can happen? I fail epically. I can't even talk English properly. What's the worst that's going to happen? I fail in a grand fashion. Whatever, I'll try. And so I started doing basically a Peter McKinnon ripoff channel where I wanted to focus on my photography. And I'm nowhere near as good as Peter McKinnon as a photographer. If you stalk my Instagram, you will see that like I'm nowhere near as good as him. So I'm like, all right, photography is probably not my thing. So why don't I be one of those idiotic, narcissistic vloggers? No one, like, I even hated myself after doing a couple of those vlogs. So I'm like, no, that's not going to be it. Also, I'm not interesting enough. I'm not Casey Neistat. So I do live sound at a music venue. And when I look up any video of front of house engineers doing front of house live audio, they're like, oh, we went live on this tour, and they present a Digico like Quantum 7 or whatever, a console that costs $100,000. And I'm like, this is little. And they have like thousands upon thousands of dollars of outboard gear. And the end result is amazing sounding, but no one is doing small venue with unknown bands that can't play in time or tune their bass drum right. Like, no one's doing this. So why don't I put a action camera on my head? And I use it's a DJI Action 4 I have on my head.
Cool.
And I look like an idiot. It looks like I'm wearing a reverse jock strap on my head, but like, it's like my POV. What you see is what I see with my eyes. And I started creating POV vlogs of the shows I worked. And I started asking bands permission, like, hey, I'm going to do this YouTube thing. Do you care if I take a couple snippets of your set? And they're like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. Thinking that it's just 10 subscribers at most, dumb YouTube channel, whatever. And sure enough, people started catching on to it. Yep. And the video that really blew up was the one where I set up my venue for a sound check. I didn't talk. I didn't do anything. I just set up like the process of how I turn on my stage box, how to tune the drums, what I do before a band comes in. And everyone started clicking on the video. It was a couple, like a month or two, and it reached like 200,000 views. I'm like,
Wow.
okay, well, clearly this is something. And I knew that it was going to be good because no one's doing small clubs and small venues for live sound. No one's doing
Right.
it. And everyone loves POV behind the scenes stuff. And I know that I'm good at tagging things right, titling it right. So the title of the video is FOH Engineer getting a music venue ready for sound check. And that blew up. And I'm like, okay, why don't I start, venturing where the views are? I started vlogging every show I worked, where I started narrating about like what's going on, what bands are coming in, like what different situations, call for different types of mixes where like the bands come in with their own rigs, their own drum sets. And that's when I started my, I call it my pro wrestling heel persona of crapping on guitar players who blast their amps to oblivion and drummers who can't tune their own drum set. Like, I don't know why all of you out there can't do it, but there's enough of you out there where it's sort of a bit now on my channel where I just constantly crap on guitar players who just can't help but blast their amps into total oblivion.
Yep.
So between that personality and showcasing local bands that no one's heard of, people are like, hey, there's like this underground movement coming in, like, and you're doing like, you're helping out local scenes. And then I remember, again, I'm going to shoehorn in pro wrestling references here. There was a promotion in the 90s called ECW, and they did exactly the same thing. They had WWF and WCW doing like the mainstream stuff, and then they came in, did something completely different, completely like independent, and it blew up and it changed the industry. So I'm not thinking I'm going to change the industry, but like I know I'm doing something that no one else was doing. And eventually, let's lead to the church fix, is what I call the Mixdown Meltdown videos. A subscriber messaged me and was like, hey, can you come fix my church sound? I'm like, all right, well, that like it's sound is sound, so it doesn't matter what genre of music and like where it's located. Let me just fix the room. It's chances are people don't know what they're doing. And I'm a big fan of Gordon Ramsay, and I'm obsessed with Kitchen Nightmares. So I'm like, all right, let me make a fun bit out of this. Let me make a parody. So the first Mixdown Meltdown episode is literally, I took the credits from Kitchen Nightmares and I just like crossed out the R and I put Hamzy's Kitchen Nightmares. Hamzy's Sound Guy Nightmares. That's what I called it. And I literally edited and shot it like it's an episode of Kitchen Nightmares. And
I love it.
Including with like the passive aggressive digs at like the sound quality in the beginning of the episode. And that just blew up. Like, and no one was doing something like this.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, well, there's clearly my niche, and that's where it's going to go. And then episode 2 is the one that you guys saw, where the multiple gospel singers that really should take some tuning lessons of how to tune their voice. And the end where the payoff at the end was the guy was feeling it. He grabbed the mic out of my hand and he started singing along, mixing himself. And I'm like, dude, that's just
That's money.
That's money content. So, and that's still my highest grossing YouTube video. Like that I think is, last time I checked, was like 500 something thousand views. And it's just amazing how much that specific video blew up. And then I get calls from churches all over the country now saying, hey, come fix our churches.
Yeah.
So that's how this whole church fix got started.
One of the things that we love about the channel is because some of our heart to our channel as well is just demystifying some of the tech ambiguity out there. People think that audio is this kind of ethereal world that you have to be born with an ear for. You have to really have been brought up in the industry for 20 plus years. And it's like, well, audio breaks down to fundamentals of mixing, right? So you have to, I mean, if you can understand that, you can fix a mix anywhere. But I wonder if you can even speak to, like, since you've done a couple of these now, what would be some of the top things that you run into in these kind of fix my mix situations? Like, what are the biggest mistakes you see, specifically churches or even other mixing environments making, besides maybe the electric player blowing out their amps? Like, there's any kind of common situations that you see as you come in to fix a mix?
I'm sorry to pick on you drummers again, but drummers who do not know how to fix the heads on their drum kit. I cannot tell you how many times I've shot 13 episodes of this so far. There's only like I think 7 episodes up now. Um, the most consistent issue that I ran into are drummers who don't know how to tune their kit. And their kits aren't bad. It's not like they're having a Fisher Price my first drum set and they're expecting like, John Bonham sounding drums.
Right.
They're good kits. They're like Yamaha studio kits, and like they're pretty competent drum sets. Get a couple of fresh Evans heads on there and you're golden. Like, it's not that hard. And I have no musical rhythm at all. I took 2 years of guitar and piano lessons. I weaseled my way through music theory class. Like, I have no business being a musician, and I can't play drums to save my life. Like, I can maybe like get through an AC/DC song because they're the simplest drum beats in the world. But how is it that a sound guy and someone who has no business being a musician, why do I care more about your drum set than you do? And that's the number one thing is poor mic placement and drums with heads that should have been changed more than 5 years ago.
Speak more to that drum mic placement piece. Do you feel like it's people just aren't being intentional where they're placing the mics, or do you feel like they're placing them wrong?
It's a lot of, hey, I'm pointing a mic here. That's good enough. Like, people don't take into consideration where if this is the head of the drum, if they're pointing straight down like here, you're going to get all the overtones. If you point a little more high up and you point it straight where the stick is going to strike the head, you're going to get the full sound of the drum. But they don't know that running into that will have a little more cymbal bleed if the drummer, and all of you do this, have the hi-hat 2 inches off the head of the snare drum. So it comes with this whole like communication that you have to have with the drummers. Like, hey, if you want your full sound, if you want to hear how your drum set's supposed to sound, mic placement's everything. The room you play in is everything. And I'm not asking churches to spend millions of dollars in sound reinforcement, although that will, like, room acoustics will help you in any situation. That's the number one most important thing you need to do. But some of the churches I've been to are over 100 years old. There's no way they're going to hang like panels on the ceiling. So we got to work with what we got. And mic placement's everything. And doing anything you can to help reduce the overtones of the drums, tuning it right, invest in a $50 drum dial, tune everything, and learn how to like check the lugs with your ears after you set the drum dial. And it's the tiniest little things that will make the biggest impact of your sound.
I think it'd be cool to kind of go around the band a little bit and hear your perspective and maybe some areas for improvements because I imagine when you show up to fix a mix at a church, you're kind of going, you're probably starting with drums because that's your biggest pain point or the biggest area for improvement for most churches. What's the next instrument you usually hit, and what are some of the mistakes that you see there?
The first thing I notice more than anything is cable management and how they have their cabling situated.
Say more.
One of the most recent churches I went to, I literally titled the episode like, this is like, I forget what I labeled it, but there was literally a picture-in-picture shot of the cable spaghetti in the thumbnail. And it was the most nightmarish situations I've ever seen as far as cable management. And I had to basically untangle everything and put everything back the way it was. And thankfully, it was an analog snake, so there was no software patching involved. Like, if you plug it in channel 1 on the snake on the floor, it's going to be channel 1 on the board on top. So that was easy. So the first thing I notice is cable management. If people don't have good cable management, it translates to me that you don't really care as much as you say you do. So, it's something that's so trivial of like how to have a good setup, which is good cable management. And next I noticed drums, because the drums are the heartbeat of a mix. And it doesn't matter what genre you are, drums dictate the pace of the song. If you have a great sounding drum track, everything else can sound meh at best, but everyone's going to remember the drum sound. And I'm a sucker for drums because it's my favorite instrument to record and mix. And I'm known on my channel and my streams for having a good drum sound. So I take great care into having a good drum sound. So if I see a drum set that needs to be tuned, I check the tuning of the drums, and of course I have to retune it because most of these drummers don't know how to tune their kit. And I show the drummer how to tune their kit. I tell them what gear to get. And I tell them, hey, if you want to take this seriously, you need to change the heads here. But for now, let's just get, levels. Let's get a sound check. And then when I'm gone, because most people don't realize I only have one day to do these church fixes.
Right.
I'm only there for one day. I can't say to them, hey, it's 6:00 at night when we're doing sound check. Someone can run to Guitar Center, get new heads. Like, Guitar Center's closed by then. So people need to take notes. And if I don't see people taking notes, I'm like, all right, these guys are going to go back to a distorted mess in 2 weeks when I'm gone.
Yeah.
So and it's whatever. But from the drums, I go to the bass guitar because bass guitar, in all my years of doing sound, bass players, for some reason, you don't like to change your strings. And I check the condition of the bass guitar.
Isn't that interesting? Drum heads and bass strings are the things that those instrumentalists don't normally change. But an acoustic player will change their strings once every 6 weeks, 2 months, if they're playing regularly. It's kind of a normal rhythm for them, but for whatever reason, like a drummer or a bass player just don't feel that normal rhythm to upkeep their instrument. Why do you think that is?
I don't know if you can see my receding hairline here, but I'm literally been scratching my head just trying to figure that out. I don't understand. Glenn Fricker, one of my favorite YouTubers, he always craps on bass players for buying herbal influences instead of buying fresh bass strains. So I'm like, guys, bass strains are a good set is $40. Just buy bass strains and keep your instrument clean. Don't have the boogers from 2 years ago on the strains and the picks. Guys, take care of your instruments.
Yep. And with ChatGPT these days, it's not hard to learn. If you don't know how to change a drum head or a bass string, it's not hard to learn a basic maintenance skill like that.
Like I said, I learned how to mix on an X32 from watching Drew Brassler's videos on his channel. I had no idea how an X32 worked, but I watched his videos and he explained how to work the X32 with every nook and cranny. I'm like, oh, well, this is easy. If you don't know how to tune a drum set, watch it on YouTube. There's literally, and when in doubt, if you don't know how to do something, there's a 12-year-old kid from Asia or Europe that is recording on a camera from MySpace from 2006 that tells you exactly what you need to know. It's
so true.
When in doubt, there's always a 12-year-old kid somewhere that knows something you don't.
So beyond string replacement on a bass, what's the other thing that you run into with bass tone or channel processing on most church mixes?
Or do you
feel like it's normally handled pretty well?
Most of the time it's handled decently. Most church mixes are not trying to do the distorted Pantera bass tone, so obviously it's a lot more smoother sounding, a much more smooth reggae sound from a bass guitar. Guitars, if anything, they're mostly clean. Again, not a lot of churches are having distorted guitars, and if they do, they're very subtle in the background. So clean guitars are foolproof, and most amps these days have a direct out. So if I look for a direct out option, I will always go direct out because it's the most consistent option you have. And if you're asking church volunteers who most of the time don't know how to mic up a cab properly or know what to look for, go direct, and it's the same consistent sound every single time, and it's foolproof. So those are the things I go for. And most of all, the only other thing that I really gauge is the organization of their board, which is most of the time an X32. And I look at how their routing set up. I look at how their inputs are set up. I look at how their EQ is. And when I see the extreme peaks and cuts on the EQ chart, I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah.
I literally turn into Bob Belcher and I have a panic attack. Oh my God. And I just literally have a brain aneurysm of looking at how they do it. So I sort it out. I reset everything, but I don't change the routing on their console. So if they have the snare drum first in their drum chain, I don't change it so it's a kick drum first. I adapt to how they have their stuff routed. So whoever is normally on the board doesn't have to relearn where their routing is. I have to adapt to their system, which is honestly the biggest challenge of these Church Fix videos, because at my show at Dingbats and even on the Wing Compact right here, I have all of my settings dialed in wherever I go. So I'm used to it. And if someone were to like put me on their scene and their preset, I won't know how to do it. Like I'll have to take a whole day to relearn the board again. So I adapt to their style and I adapt to their mix. So I just change the EQ, I change the compression, I make sure the monitor routing's right, and I just do a sound check using their setup. And whatever effect that they have, like whatever reverb settings they got, I just run with it because it's what they want and what they think sounds good. Of course, if it sounds like garbage and it's like overbearing everything, I'll adjust it. But you know, that's the biggest thing is like instrument maintenance and how they have their board and routing organized. That to me is two of the biggest things that I notice whenever I do one of these church videos. And I'm sure you guys have some nightmare stories too.
Yes, the cable management we empathize with deeply because it's 90% of our clients, when we start working with them, they haven't really thought about that. They don't have the personnel to think about that. They don't have the time on the timesheet to think about that. And, you know, validly so. They've got, most of the time they're inheriting a system. The church has been there for a long time. It's more of it's not a lack of care, but it is just a lack of time available. But, you know, having a neat workspace can really, I think, decompress some of the stress levels walking in somewhere for a mix engineer or for a tech team member in general. If there's a spider's nest of cable versus a nice clean workspace, it's a lot easier to invite somebody into that environment to serve or to volunteer. So I definitely empathize with that piece. I'm wondering, when you see, I mean, if you're working a lot with X32s, you get these churches, I want to speak to vocals for a little bit, because vocals, I think, are the hard, you can't change strings on a vocal. You can't change drum heads on a vocal. Like, it is, the vocal quality is what it is from the vocalist itself. So when you get into a spot, you don't have a wave sound grid server giving you auto tune. You don't have nice, maybe mic capsules that you can swap out for different frequency responses. How are you handling that process? And are you engaging with the team at all in that sound check process? Or is it mostly just you kind of stay at the mixer and do what you can with the channel strip processing?
So when I assess the problems, once I go around and I assess all the problems, I bring their tech leader or the head pastor or like whoever's in charge of the church, and I bring the whole team together. I'm like, okay. And being an Italian from New Jersey, I'm pretty blunt with things. So like I sometimes come off as like way too upfront. And with this last episode that I posted with the church in Philadelphia, they were using a website-based stream service. They were using Restream, but they were doing it from Chrome instead of like OBS. So with their settings using Chrome, it comes off, you lose all the fidelity, and you have to do a million different things to make sure the fidelity is good. But instead of doing that and relying on Chrome, which is never the most reliable and it eats a boatload of computer resources, use OBS and just put in your Restream stream key, and it will do the job for you. And you can record to your local computer as well. So when I say to someone, hey, this will help you out greatly. The reason why your mix is sounding pretty bad is because you're doing this, and this. I'm going to help you fix this, and this, and you need to buy this, and this after I leave and get your and like improve your stuff. So with the last church that I did, I said, I'm going to install OBS and I'm going to make sure that all you got to do is click this, and this, and you're good. You're on. Your drum heads, they are so rippled. It looks like the Appalachian mountain range just like popping up on the heads. Like, these haven't been changed since 1995. You need to get these out. You need to clean the drum shells, and you need to put fresh heads on. And there's just no excuse for that. And your guitar player, I don't know if this is like a $100 Fender, my first guitar, Squire, but he's plugging into a Boss amp, and it's not like a decent Boss amp. It's the entry level practice model Boss amp. And I'm like,
got it at Target on clearance.
You got it. Like, I'm one of the biggest people that say gear doesn't matter, but it matters to an extent. Like, you need a certain level of quality to just get passable in these days. I mean, I'm
Well,
not telling someone to go.
we always say it's always about source tone. Like if you're sending bad source, your mix engineer has nothing to work with, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that you have to have the best gear, but you need to be able to capture your source in a high quality fashion so you have a good quality mix.
So if I want a clear, clean, distorted guitar, but in the clean tone setting, I don't want the sound of distortion because your pickups were like McDonald's Happy Meal level quality. Like I need a decent level of pickups here, and then I can make this amp work. Because I at my venue we have a partnership with the School of Rock. So the final project of every semester, the kids come in with their practice instruments and they play a show. So like I'm used to playing with I'm used to mixing with children and people who don't know how to do this and getting good sounds out of them. And the first thing I tackle every time is vocal. And I know people are going to go I know the audio people that are watching this are going to be like, oh my God, you need to do the kick drum first. No, I do vocals first because I sound check in order of importance to my mix and my overall presentation. That way, if I get the lead vocal and I get him or her sounding great in their monitor and everyone can hear them just fine, not only do I not have to shout now across the church to be like, can you hear this or can we go to that? I just talk into my talkback and then they could talk to me on their microphone.
Yeah.
And then that gives me an opportunity to also re-EQ something if I'm hearing something, different. And how I got the vocals sounding on my last episode, I was in Philadelphia and of course everyone loves the Eagles down there. So I'm like, talk football. So as they were doing an impromptu NFL talk podcast, I was going through all 8 or 9 of their wireless mics and just EQing them individually based on who was talking into them. And it took a long time. I could have just copied the settings, but I wanted to give everyone their own distinct EQ because everyone's voice is different. But once I get vocals first, then I go to drums, then I go to bass, then I go to guitar. And then I go to keyboards or any other important instrument. And then once I hear the type of music that they're playing, a lot of people have digital organs and digital pianos working together. Obviously, the guitars are not going to be the forefront of the mix. If it's a church, they're going to want the organs. They're going to want the keyboards. Those are the full sound of the band. So keyboards, drums, vocals, if I get those right, I can just put a little bit of bass in there to get the low end and a little bit of guitar to cut through a little bit. And then that's it. Yeah. And then when I'm done with that, they're like, oh my God, this sounds amazing. And then every time I do a church fix, I mix on these very headphones I use. These are the Direct Sound EX29 Plus, really good flat frequency response, and they're passive noise canceling headphones. So I don't hear anything going on in my room around me. So when I'm mixing front of house at either a Dingbats or I'm doing a church fix, I wear these headphones. And you see in my video, you see me putting on the headphones and I switch to the board audio. I take them off. I switch back to the room audio. And the room audio you hear is just on my action cam. And if the room sounds good on my crappy little Action 4 microphone, it's going to sound good for the congregation in there. Yeah. So when it's all balanced, I'm like, okay, let's listen to before, let's listen after. And then I always make sure when they're sound checking to have the band leader or the tech leader come up and listen on the headphones. Not only is it a great content moment, but the moment if I have any insecurity doing a rescue, or if I'm thinking, this isn't going well, Chris, what are you doing? You're kind of dropping the ball here. You're kind of pulling the Dallas Cowboys, here and just blowing it. I'm a Packers fan. I'm used to blowing in January too. So don't get pissy with me, Dallas fans. But every time I'm like, Chris, you're blowing it. I listen to I watch their reaction to hearing the mix. And when the last episode, they were listening on the headphone and they were clapping and going, hallelujah. I'm like, what other sign of nailed it do you need than that? Right. Forget my own ego, forget my own pride. That's why I do it. And when they approve of it, I'm like, okay, I'm not touching anything else. This is done. And then I listen to the before on the way home and I'm like, oh my God, this sounds night and day better. So it's a very interesting process.
how do you transition from your kind of mix perspective or your mix approach from rock band venue mix to church world? Because I would imagine that the mix philosophy, or at least kind of the aim of the mix, is maybe sometimes a little bit different. In a rock venue, you probably got more, we want more driving drums, bass, guitars, kind of thrashy sound. And, you know, in church, they're really focused on that piano vocal led kind of environment. So how do you walk into that space and kind of shift your ears? Do you prep yourself with reference tracks? Do you listen to stuff on the way in? Like, how have you handled that kind of transition?
It's going to sound crazy, but I go into these things completely blind. Like I go into these things, and I know it might be hard for people to like either comprehend or understand, but I go into every rescue completely blind.
Nice.
The only thing that I go into that I have any preparation before is their instrumentation, their input chart, and if they're kind enough to give me a complete like microphone list of what they got. I mostly just watch their stream and I Google image search their church and I look at the room. And if it's a big hall, I'm like, all right, if there's like 50, 60 feet and a 20-foot high ceilings, this is going to be a very, very echoey room here. And I just got to work with what I'm given. Most of these churches do not have room mics. So I always tell them at the end of every rescue, just spend the $100, get a pair of Behringer C2 condenser microphones, plug them in locally at the board, and just assign them to the bus to go to the Matrix and watch your stream quality just skyrocket with room mics. But I focused mainly just on how I would mix any other band. Like I get their drums, like I maybe for rock and metal, I compress the crap out of my drums. Like I do 6 to 8 dB gain reduction with like a 40 to 50 second attack, very quick release. And I hammer that. And I even send that through a parallel bus where I just like, again, I squash the crap out of my drums for rock and metal. For church, I'm easier on the compressor. I do 2 to 1 setting. I do 3 to 1 setting. I do only maybe 3 dB of gain reduction tops. And depending on how they're playing, or I hear how the drummer's playing, if the drummer is playing like, you know, a very smooth jazz type, I almost never compress the drums at all. But if the guy is pulling off some Buddy Rich or John Bonham stuff going on, I'm like, okay, this guy is my kind of drummer. So then I just ease up with the levels. Like I compress it almost the same, but I ease the levels in and the drums aren't prominent. So with church and worship, obviously you want to hear the words and the gospel from the pastor, from the vocalists, and you want to sing along. And so vocals are for live sound for me are always the most important. That's why I sound check them first. That's why I build a mix around my vocals first. And once I get vocals in, then I hear the band play, and I'm like, okay, with this room, with how this is sounding, with how the band's playing, give me 2 or 3 songs of what you guys normally play, and I just mix bass off of that. And most of the time, it's vocals with keyboards and bass, organs, little bit of drums for extra punch and a little bit of a groove, and then either an acoustic guitar, or some churches have a saxophone. If they have a saxophone, that's the sexiest instrument in the world to me. I love a saxophone, and I'm a big fan of ska bands. So like anytime anyone incorporates horns into their mix, I'm like, oh yes, I get to cook with this. So if they have a saxophone, I'll have that cut through the entire time. I love saxophones, and especially if they're like if they're like subtle with their playing, if they have like little bit of like triplet notes or whatever. I barely passed music school, so like whatever like little subtle notes that they play in the background, or if they have a solo, I want the saxophone to be the most dominant thing in the mix. So I will crank horns if they have it, because they're so subtle and you want to be able to hear them when the guitar is not playing. So I have the high end of the guitar cut through. I almost roll off a lot of the low end on the guitar. I roll off to about 120, 130 on guitars. And I know, again, that makes people go crazy, but I think the biggest misconception of live sound versus studio sound is how the room and what the people in the congregation are hearing compared to what you may hear on a studio record. And
Yeah.
most of these churches don't have a separate room with a separate console that can mix everything perfectly for the stream. They don't have Dante networks. They don't have split snakes. So the front of house, what I'm hearing at the board has to sound as good on the stream versus in the house. So that's the biggest challenge, is just balancing how good front of house sounds versus how good the stream sounds. And that is the toughest challenge for any of these churches. And that's what I do on any of my streams. So if you listen to my streams and listen to any of the bands play on my broadcast, what you're hearing is what's going over my PA. I just have a matrix that goes to the stream. That's it.
I love it. I love it. Chris, what's down the pipeline for you in terms of your channel? What are you excited about? What are some videos coming down that viewers could be excited about with you?
So since I don't want you guys to heavily edit this out, so I'll just kind of spoil it now. I have a new series of videos coming out on my channel. I mean, there is more Mixdown Meltdown videos coming. I have like 6 or 7 episodes I haven't edited yet that I need to publish. There are a bunch of churches that have emailed me. So if any of you churches that emailed me are watching this, I am sorry I haven't gotten back to you. I will in due time. I'm sorry. But my 2 buddies of mine are setting up a new video series on my channel where we are going to be basically a trinity of sources for musicians. So I come from the live sound background and the do-it-yourself DIY home studio setup and bare minimalism. My one friend has a business degree and is expert with marketing. He's also a fantastic drummer. And then my third friend, he is a phenomenal producer. He works in different genres and he's in literally every single band on the East Coast. So he's a fantastic musician and is more like pro studio level. So between the 3 of us, we're starting a video series where no matter what level you're at, you can watch our content. We're going to have in-studio vlogs of actual sessions. We're going to have mixed breakdowns of everything that we do. And we are also going to be having a podcast. So I'm getting back into podcasting and we're going to cover every topic you can imagine in the world of live sound, music, and basically content creation, because we want to be a one-stop shop for just about everybody.
I love it. That's super exciting, and I'm super excited to see the content come to fruition, because it'll serve not only musicians in your field, but it'll serve musicians in our audience and people looking to grow in their skills and their tool belts for years to come. So thanks for putting effort into that, and I'm excited to see it get launched. If you haven't yet subscribed, we'll link Chris's channel down below, and I'm sure he'll hit it up when the new content launches. So Chris, it's been a joy to have you on. You have shared so much value for listeners, mixers, even I think band members and musicians on teams to just kind of come in with more education. And so thank you for being willing to make some time in your day and to share with our audience. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you guys for first off inviting me on here. Like, this was like, again, it's just surreal because I've been doing this for just about 1.5 years now with this whole YouTube thing. And I went from nothing to where I'm at now. And it's just, a lot of it's luck, but a lot of it's like, yeah, I'm not totally incompetent. So let me just do what I do. And if people watch, they watch. And a lot of you are watching. So that's all I can say is I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, it was a blast to have you on, Chris. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.
You too, guys. Thank you for having me.